Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southern-appalachian-herbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southern-appalachian-herbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Boy, it's been one crazy week since I last spoke with you, hasn't it? Oh boy, yeah. Horrible things have happened in Canada. Armed stormtroopers running over innocent people with horses and beating the crap out of them because they dared say they don't think they should be mandated to have something stuck in their arm and put in their body. Wow, imagine that. Standing up for individual freedom in a free country. Meanwhile, I asked you a couple of weeks ago to pray for my best friend who lives in Odessa, that's Ukraine. And Russia just invaded Ukraine, slaughtering innocent women and men and children and old people and young people for no moral justification whatsoever, except they think the country belongs to them. And what a contrast, huh? A nation where people gave up their guns gets the crap beaten out of them, sent home, their bank account seized. A nation where the government handed out guns and hand grenades to everyone, I think, over the age of 17 who was willing to go and volunteer to fight for their country and their lives and freedoms, has defied the expectations of the world by holding out, fighting back until hopefully they can get some help from other European nations. As my friend in Ukraine always tells me, this is not America's fight. She always says Ukrainians must fight for Ukraine. Ukrainian allies or other countries that realize they may be the next victims of Russia should also join with, aid, and assist the Ukrainians, and they seem to be. Everyone thought the Ukrainians would be crushed in the first day, and here it is, have been almost a week. Ukrainians have reportedly killed thousands of Russian soldiers, trained, equipped troops with modern armaments. Untrained Ukrainian civilians using inadequate weapons are holding their own against a modern army. That's a contrast, isn't it? I mean, we run and cower from every little threat, you know? We have the legal right to protest, but when people show up and protest, depending on which side of the political aisle they're on, I mean, if you're a Black Lives Matter protester, you can burn down cities and kill cops, right? If you happen to think that the election may have been a little funny, maybe the votes weren't all legal that were counted. Hey, I'm from North Carolina. We have a long history of voter fraud here. I mean, trust me. North Carolina is known as a state where ballot boxes go riding around until they're full of the ballots for the right uh, candidate, and both parties do it. I'm not kidding, by the way. That's North Carolina. Voter fraud's real. I mean, you don't have to. I don't care if you like Trump or hate him. I don't care if you like Biden or hate him. In North Carolina, we've known for centuries how elections are stolen, and we've had very few clean elections in this state. I'm not making that up. I can pull out the history books and show you. I'm not making any claims about the last election. I'm not making any claims about Trump or Biden or anything. I think everybody knows where I stand on that. Um, let's go, Brandon. But uh, think of the difference between protesters on one side, how they're treated, and protesters on the other side, how they're treated. The law is supposed to treat everybody equally. Equal treatment under the law. If you're, I don't know, Bob Smith, and you spend your time smoking crack and hanging out with hookers and such, you're supposed to go to jail. And if your name's Hunter Biden, you're supposed to go to jail too. We don't have equal treatment under the law. And whenever someone points that out, they tend to get arrested and get the crap beaten out of them and thrown in jail for a year without a trial. And American people, yeah, we're cool with that. Hey, as long as, we got YouTube videos and 30-second TikTok videos and all the fast food we can eat, we're good with whatever, forget about it. Yeah, well, the Ukrainians just are showing the world what average people can actually do. 80-some-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers sitting by their door with a rifle, just taking out anybody who walks by or tries to force their way into their house, can actually, a few million of them can actually hold their own against a few 100,000 well-armed, trained military. Yeah, this is a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call. And don't think that the bad guys in the world aren't noticing this. Don't think that they're not going to try to make America like Canada, who gave up their guns a few years ago. Australia, who gave up their guns a few years ago. I'm not advocating for anything. I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying just look at the world. If you want to know why, whenever a dictator comes into power, first thing he does is institute gun control. That's what Adolf Hitler did. First thing he did was take away the German people's guns. Only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's been the truth since, I don't know, I think maybe John Wayne said that. No, actually, it could have been Colt. Was his name Henry Colt? Probably not Henry, but yeah, the Colt firearms man. He called the pistol the equalizer. The Colts, interestingly, used to have an estate up where I was born in the mountains of North Carolina, and yeah, they were apparently a fairly colorful family. But we talk a lot about on this show about self-sufficiency and learning to grow your own food, learning to take care of your own medical needs. I try not to get political. I'm not getting political now. I'm not advocating for anything, but a big part of self-sufficiency is being able to protect yourself and your family. And the people who are supposed to be on your side, fill in the blanks here, could be your neighbor, could be anybody. Often will turn against you if they think it's in their own self-interest. Never rely on another person to protect you, whether it's advocating for your own health, you know, understanding your own medical problems and medical needs, and knowing that when you go into, a doctor's office, the doctor may be absolutely wonderful. I mean, he may be doing the very best job he can. He may just be wrong, and you need to go get a second or even a third opinion. So a lot of times we go into these situations and the doctor or whatever just doesn't care. And I've seen that happen a lot. There's a lot of medical abuse and a lot of medical error in this country. And if, you know what, if you're not paying that doctor out of pocket with your own money, or you have some really good insurance and they can get the same amount for doing a lousy job as they can for doing a good job, like if you're in a socialized medicine system or Medicare, Medicaid, Medicaid especially, universal health care. What incentive do they have except the kindness, goodness of their own heart, their own personal integrity? Well, I'm all for personal integrity and the kindness and goodness of your heart, but you know what? It's called original sin, folks. Humanity is more inclined to do evil than good. That's one of our nice Latin words. It's called concupiscence. Concupiscence. It has the same cupidity is the same root word from which we get the name Cupid, the old little flying baby that shoots people with arrows. And in mythology, it means greed. It means avarice. It means proclivity to do wrong to satisfy ourselves as opposed to help another. And, that's not the progressive model that says people are born good and they just need to be brought to this higher level of enlightenment. Well, how often has that progressive model worked out? You can take Nazi Germany, which was a progressive government that slaughtered millions of Jews and gypsies and Catholics and all kinds of people. You can take China, progressive government, enslaving and you know genocide. You can take America, also a progressive government where we kill, what is it, 16 million babies a year? Yeah. Someone said today, how can Americans sit in judgment of Russia with all the evil America does? Let me tell you, never fall for that. Never fall for it. What happened in the Garden of Eden when the serpent told? Well, if it's okay for God to eat the apple that he forbade you to eat, well, it's okay for you to eat it too, right? I mean, that's only fair. This is some kind of equality. We have to be a little jealous of another. Yeah, yeah. Original sin. Another person will say, well, if you're a sinner and you condemn the wrong that someone else has done, you're a hypocrite. Yeah, well, maybe you're a hypocrite. Everybody's a hypocrite. Every human being that walks the face of the earth is a hypocrite. Wrong is still wrong and right is still right. No matter how much evil America has done, and yes, America has done evil. I say that as a person whose family is in the DAR, that's the Daughters of the American Revolution. My family actually fought in the American Revolution. My family fought in the War of 1812. Heck, I mean, I'm, I'm related to King Richard the Lionheart. All right, Edward the Confessor, another king. My great 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 grandfather was Lord Cheshire. I can look at England and America, two of the greatest, most moral societies ever, and say, yes, both have done a great deal of evil. No, England should not have enslaved the Irish people. Okay, yeah, my last name's Carroll. I'm a little biased, but you know what? The Irish are the most enslaved and persecuted people on the face of the earth because of the English. For all the good the English have done, they not only enslaved the Irish, but they're the ones that, brought African slaves to America. Yeah, we Southerners always get blamed for it when it was really the English that were doing it. America also should not have participated in slavery, should not have slaughtered the Indians. I mean, come on, really. The Indians on their case, a lot of them were not exactly quick to make peace with white settlers. They went around slaughtering white people. It was a war. There was bad on both sides. Bad is still bad and good is still good. It is still okay for us to say, yes, the Holocaust was a horrible, horrible tragedy and Nazis are bad. It is still okay for us to say that Russia is in the wrong in the Ukrainian conflict. That does not mean it's our war. But again, I'm going to ask you to say a prayer for the Ukrainian people. I'm going to ask you to say a prayer for the Taiwanese people, because the weak, feckless, senile jackass we call our president that has allowed all this to happen has just given a green light for China to take Taiwan. Okay? That's the truth. China says they want to take Taiwan. This is not a political statement. China has made no secret of the fact they want to take Taiwan. Taiwan does not want to be ruled by China. That means an aggressive government is going to go slaughter and subjugate innocent people. That's still wrong. That's still wrong. Our role as individuals is to have a conscience, and that conscience leads us to make judgments between right and wrong. Always pray for what's right, which is to follow your conscience, to have an educated conscience. Always do your duty as a Christian if you're a Christian, as a Jew if you're a Jew, as a Muslim if you're a Muslim. Yes, I have known many good moral Muslims who know the difference between right and wrong. I've had many good moral secular friends who were not even religiously inclined, but who had a conscience that was educated in right and wrong. Always stand for what's right personally. Have integrity. Don't steal. Don't cheat on the person you love that loves you. Do not hurt another person unless it's in defense of your own life. That is the very basis of a civilized society. This relativism is destroying the basis of society, starting by destroying the family. Destroying the family, destroying religion, taking away all morality until might makes right. That's the end result. Might makes right. They say the victors write the history. The guy with the most guns wins. That isn't morality. That is actual pure evil. So today, I'm just asking you to remember, please say a prayer for my friend, her family, her countrymen in Ukraine. Don't be cowed or swayed by arguments that erode your moral fiber. Do what's right when you can. We all fall short. We all fail. We all fail. I have. I will again. But don't stop trying. And to me, a big part of that trying is taking care of your family and yourself and your health and your neighbors. And a lot of that does have to do with herbal medicine, which actually makes this relevant. So let's get back to herbal medicine. I guess I've already done our 2-minute Latin lesson for the day. I told you the root of concupiscence, meaning the proclivity to do wrong other than right. I'll give you another one, just so much easier. How about labor? All right. You ever want to impress someone and say, I know a Latin word, labor, Labor, to work. That's Latin. When I work, it's laboro. When he, she, or it works, it's laborat, but it's labor is the root. So now let's get into our show for the week, which is picking up where we left last week. I'm giving you some history on the history and practice of Christian herbal medicine, which is the title of my currently new book. I have a new one out soon. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on my blog or on my website, which is judsoncarroll.com. Actually hosted by Substack, so it will redirect to Substack. But Christian herbal medicine, history and practice. Last week we went through early Christian medicinal herbalism, and we got into the Middle Ages. We got pretty much up through about 11 to 1200 AD. We covered a lot of ground. In this one, I'm really going to focus in on a couple of interesting figures, just a handful of interesting figures, really coming up to, the time of the Protestant Reformation, as hopefully you know, before about 1500 and so, um, all Christians were Catholic or Orthodox. There was no Protestant church. Some people are a little confused on that point, but there wasn't. Okay, Christians were Catholic or Orthodox. There were a few small, like kind of breakaway sects. A lot of them, some Protestants try to identify with, but if you really looked at the history of them, you wouldn't want to. They were not what we would consider a Christian today. I mean, like they were rightfully condemned as not holding Christian beliefs. They may have thought they did, and maybe they did in all good conscience and honesty. Okay. But there were people, for instance, one that's often referenced, and the name of them won't come to me right now. They were a breakaway sect, but we would not call them Protestant. Okay. This was a heretical sect, because in the Bible, Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. You can't swear to anything. Well, as we said, he said, don't swear to anything. Do not invoke the name of the Lord in vain. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Well, they took that to mean that all contracts were anti-Christian. All right, well, let's think about what that actually means. They meant you could not have any loyalty to a nation. You could not sign up to be a soldier. You could not fight on behalf of your country. Well, that immediately put them at odds with your country, and they were considered illegal right off. You could not have any loyalty to a family. Right. Yeah, you could not even be loyal to your parents. They forbade marriage because the marriage contract was, vowing to spend your life with a partner. When you get into this, when you really go down that road, I mean, they, of course, forbade all property contracts. You could not buy or sell. You could not own anything. You could not agree to work for someone and get a wage because that was making that pledge of saying, I'm going to go work for you, you know, not in any way a legitimate or rational understanding of the Word of God. So until about 1500 or so, all all hospitals, all colleges, all we'll just call them mainstream churches were either Catholic or Orthodox. So then along comes, Martin Luther and along really, well, before Martin Luther, you've got King Henry who just in England who started the Anglican Church just to legalize divorce essentially. And because he felt that anyone pledging allegiance to anything other but the King of England was committing heresy. Not committing heresy, committing treason. So, so the Anglican Church is actually, somewhat different than the Lutheran and the various Protestant denominations that came after that that had doctrinal issues as opposed to a political and nationalistic ideology. But we really need to back up and start with a figure named Paracelsus. Now, it's not his given name, but his given name was actually, let me see, Theophrastus, Bombastus, von Hohenheim. So he always had sort of an outrageous name. He was such a great student, and he was actually a brilliant genius in school that he named himself Paracelsus, meaning he had surpassed a Greek figure known as Celsus. He was Paracelsus. His father was a physician, and he followed in his footsteps. Now, we need to go to, I guess, around 800 AD. And you remember after the fall of Rome, the Germanic tribes were they were barbarians. They were warlords. It was a very violent place. And gradually, the church under the Emperor Charlemagne made that Christendom, settled the whole place, went in, put in monasteries and schools and hospitals and a rule of law, and everybody came under the Holy Roman Empire for a period of time. And then we kind of get into the Middle Ages where things get less Rome centric, in terms of government. But one of those monasteries was founded in Einsiedeln. Now, again, my pronunciation of German is really horrible. People who speak German always say you said that wrong. So I don't know if that is actually how you pronounce it. But Einsiedeln at this point in time was in the Black Forest in a region controlled by warlords and basically full of highway robbers and kind of like pirates. I mean, they would steal what you had. They would take you and sell you as a slave. I mean, it was a rough place to be. Well, there was a monk that, like a lot of the monks, especially the ones that were interested in herbal medicine. I mean, we talked about Saint Fiacre last week. He just wanted to get out in nature and live a contemplative life. He wanted to be away from everybody, like Saint Benedict, who founded the Benedictines. He wanted to get away from the city. He went, lived in a cave and prayed, and people eventually came to him for healing and wisdom. And a monastery was formed. Well, the same thing with this monk. At this time, we're talking around 822, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna say right around 822, no later than say 900 AD. The monk's name was Meinrad. Now, Meinrad, and again, I'm probably mispronouncing that, he wanted to get away and really kind of follow the Benedictine rule, but the Benedictines also couldn't be just contemplatives. Their work was to care for the sick and to garden and to provide food for people. That's why they operate all the hospitals and schools and such. Their motto, actually, we can give you a little bit more Latin, is ora et labora. Remember, I just said labor, labora. Ora means to speak, or actually in this sense to pray, and labora means to work. So prayer and work. Wonderful motto. It's the motto I try to live by, ora et labora. Well, he found this lake in Einsiedeln, in this just beautiful place where he could get away from everything, and with a few of his students, he went out and built a small church and eventually kind of became a hermit out there. But people came to him from all over because he was a really great priest. He would give them really good counsel, and they could spend time out there in just the peace and beauty of nature. I mean, you've probably seen the Black Forest before. This Bavaria. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's actually very much like the mountains of North Carolina where I grew up, and I can understand so well why people would want to get out of the dirty cities and come find some peace in the woods in the summertime, obviously. They probably couldn't make it in the winter. And over time, this monastery, well, this church, it built up. There was just it was very small. There was not ever at this point in time more than really just one person living there, and that was Meinrad. Word kind of got out that he had a golden crucifix. Wasn't actually true. Actually, Saint Hildegard von Bingen, who we talked about last week, was a patron of the later monastery there, and she sent them a crucifix and several religious icons and such. But at this time, this was nothing but a wooden building, from what I understand. Okay, and I'm mainly referencing a beautiful book called The Life of Paracelsus. It was written right around 1911. Anna Stoddard was the one who wrote it, and a couple other books, but this is my main source. She really talks about this little church, Einzelden, Einzeldeln, I think there's an L in there. Anyway, it was still a very rough place to be, and there were a couple of warlords, and they did not appreciate Meinrad's telling people to live as Christians. He told people to be moral and not to steal from people, kill people who were not members of their, you know, ethnic tribe, and they didn't like that at all. And at one point, the main warlord kind of removed his protection from Meinrad, and two highway robbers went in and killed him, trying to find that golden crucifix that really didn't exist. Well, according to legend, Meinrad had two pet ravens, essentially. He was all alone out there in the middle of nowhere, and if you've ever been around crows and ravens, you'll find out they're just incredibly smart. They're actually fairly easy to make pets of. You start feeding them, they start coming around, and they can talk just like parrots. It's pretty incredible. A raven or a crow, I think more a raven than a crow, but actually, if you have one, a pet one, can learn more human language than a parrot. So they're incredibly intelligent birds. They like to play games. They will play hide and seek type of games where they take something and hide it from you. They'll actually drop things on your head. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, look it up. These are really intelligent, interesting birds. And as a crow hunter, I have a great deal of respect for my prey in that regard. These two ravens saw their master killed and chased the robbers as they fled. And when the people of the nearby village came and found Meinrad dead and found he was murdered, the crows were flying back and forth and led the people to his murderers who were tried and hanged. So that is the legend of Meinrad. You will see if you ever look for him, he's a saint. He was canonized by the church. In any emblems, any paintings of Saint Meinrad, there are two crows, two ravens that are pictured there as part of that legend. So this has always been a place that was very connected to nature, to say the very least. Well, after Meinrad was killed, it kind of fell into disrepair. Eventually, some more monks went out and kind of built it up a little more. Like I said, St. Hildegard sponsored them, helped raise funds. They ended up building a very small monastery there. And it became a major place for pilgrimage. People from all over the world would come to this just small monastery. And this went on for centuries. People went there to stay, they went there to study, they went there for healing. The monks were very good with herbs. They were Benedictines who were trained in medicine, but there was also a lot of miracles that happened there. And I think one of the most incredible miracles was, I told you it kind of fallen in disrepair for a while. Well, when the monks went back in and the bishop and the priest and everything, they said, well, we really need to reconsecrate this church. After months of rebuilding it and getting everything ready, they go in and they're ready to bring in the bishop, have him consecrate the church to, you know, the tradition of he comes in and says, this is now a house of God, right? The very night before he's about to consecrate it, hears something. They hear a noise coming from the church. So the bishop was Conrad of Constance. Bishop Conrad of Constance was a man of deeply devotional nature and habit, and rose about midnight on the eve of consecration to pray for the new church. As he entered, the most wonderful singing met his ear. Some of the Benedictine monks were in the church, and with him they went to the door of the little chapel from which the sound proceeded. Looking in with reverent astonishment, they found the chapel lighted up and a great choir of angels conducting its consecration, with a chant and a prayer and ceremony according to the ritual of the church. They listened till the celestial function was ended, and then returned to the monastery with hearts uplifted and amazed. The bishop felt in the human ceremony of the following chapel the next day he had no share in it, for God had consecrated it. Well, this was amazing at the time. I mean, believe it or not, the Catholic Church is incredibly skeptical of miracles. They actually have like a whole division, like an investigative unit that tries to disprove any claim of miracles so that when they say an official miracle has happened, no one can come along later and say it was a fake. Well, the bishop says, no, wait, we cannot consecrate it. I heard the voice of God. I heard angels telling me this chapel has been consecrated. Well, the cardinal and the other bishops did not believe him. They thought maybe it was a hallucination. She writes again, when Everhard and the assembled monks were told, they were astonished and troubled, and feared that Conrad and their brothers had seen a mocking vision or were carried away by a fantasy. All right, that's very understandable. Most of us would think the same thing today, right? They got the bishop convinced, go in and reconsecrate the church. So all these people come into this little chapel, and you've got skeptics, and you've got people who believe what they've seen, and you've got, political figures and religious figures, and they get ready to do this consecration. And suddenly, everything goes still. And she writes, scarcely had the first words been spoken when a voice from above said 3 times in reverberating tones, stop, brother. This chapel is already consecrated by God. So immediately you could see this is not a normal place. This is a place of miracles and just an incredible place. Well, eventually it became known just all throughout the region, and people flocked to it, and it became just a major place for pilgrimage. And a town built up around it. The town built up mainly to take care of all the pilgrims that were coming in. I mean, someone had to sell food for them, someone had to set up hotels, someone had to, and then people would move in and live there, and then schools had to be built and all that. So the town was built around this tiny little church out in the middle of nowhere. This is hundreds of years later. Okay? We're now up to probably 14 something, right? So the town has to hire a doctor. By this time, we had good medical schools. The Benedictines were still running them, but the practice of medicine and the priesthood had been separated. The church decided that priests specifically had to care for the spiritual needs of a person. Monks and nuns were still able to practice medicine, but their first duty was their religious duties, and they were training professional doctors to go out and work as doctors secularly. Okay, but the education was still very much religious in nature. And so they hired the man who would be the father of Paracelsus. And he was known to be just an absolutely excellent doctor. He was a chemist. He had his own little laboratory in the house, and he was, a quiet man who just everybody really respected. And he was a real naturalist, too. He really knew the herbs of the area. Well, his son was born, and the mother died very young. And the son was the father's constant companion. She writes about all their travels out in the woods, going from house to house, treating the sick, but also really spending a lot of time. Paracelsus was taught all the local herbs, all the native herbs to that region. And so he knew not only the herbs of the officina, from the Latin tradition, basically what's, Dioscorides materia medica, he knew the native herbs, the indigenous herbs, and the folk traditions of German folk medicine. He grew up, just very interested in this, but also very interested in chemistry. He was taught a lot by his father. He went to school in the nearby town, which was a mining town. You probably heard of the Fuggers. They were, big mining family, and they had metallurgy schools. You go to school there and you learn a lot of different things, but the main thrust of that education was to learn chemistry and metallurgy. At the time, chemistry was very closely related to alchemy. Alchemy, as you may know, is essentially chemistry with a lot of spiritual and occult influence. They say it goes back to ancient Egypt. It's just sort of magic mixed with science. All right, that was what everybody studied at the time, and a lot of very devout Christians were also alchemists. It was just very common at the time. Eventually, alchemy was condemned by the church, and that's not just the Catholic Church. That's the Lutheran and the Anglican and all churches as being superstition and occult. So you get by the time this kid is in his teens, far more educated than anyone in our day. He goes to college, he just blows them away. He ends up going to from one college to another looking for better and better professors, and his mind was incredible. He's absolutely surpassed his fellow students and his professors by the time he was 18 years old. And so he took that name of Paracelsus. Well, you don't, let's put it this way. First of all, he was a short, pudgy uh, kid with a pug nose, bandy legs. He had rickets because, his father wasn't the best cook, I guess. And not a kid who was going to be immune from being bullied. So for him to take the name of Paracelsus, everybody had to be looking at this kid like, wow, he is an absolute genius. And especially if he was able to do it without getting beaten up, right? But he certainly didn't do it without making enemies. From that point on, he became an absolutely celebrated doctor. He went around and cured things no one else could cure. Everywhere he went, he made enemies because he did not, for one thing, he did not believe that the apothecaries, the pharmacists of the time, were honest. He could use his knowledge of chemistry and prove that what they were giving him in their patented formulas was counterfeit. So he absolutely offended the entire pharmaceutical apothecary industry of the day that had guilds and unions essentially and was very protected. He upset doctors because he would go in and say, look, just bleeding this patient is not getting you anywhere. You're killing your patient. I have some herbs I'm going to use. And he would make his own formulas. And that's just one example. He was hired on as a professor at a major medical college. He should have been the most respected professor of his day. But he looked around, he thought, well, you know what? I'm not teaching very many people here because essentially by law, by the rules of the university, he could only teach in Latin. So he was only teaching students that had come from wealthy families who had been able to be trained in Latin. Again, it was part of the guild system. It was the unions, the trade unions of the day. He said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to teach in German so everybody can understand it. Well, he went further than that. And he said, I'm not just teaching the students that came to the school. I'm going to go outside and invite anybody who wants to come listen to my lectures. And I'm going to teach them all about medicine and medicinal herbs. Wow. Okay. Just now, undermine the university system. My dearly deceased friend Mike Adams, Dr. Mike Adams. Mike Adams from the University of Wilmington, North Carolina, who recently committed suicide because he went against the university and they took away his tenure and his wife left him, and it was pretty bad. Okay, that's still an issue today. Now, Paracelsus had just totally offended the entire educational establishment. It was believed at the time that he was upsetting the political order as well, because if you didn't have respect for your professors, and you might not have respect for your priest, and you might not have respect for your king, who was, everything had to be done in these official terms, then he had totally upset all the doctors because he was giving people knowledge to treat themselves. Oh, heaven forbid people actually be able to take care of their own medical needs. And so, he was really turning the world on its head. His life was threatened. He had to flee from one country to the next. He actually slept side of the road, sleeping under trees. He worked as a military surgeon and doctor. He treated soldiers. He treated kings. He was in demand all throughout the known, Western Europe at the time, Central Europe really, because he was the very best doctor. And he also used the indigenous herbs, which just upset everybody completely because they were only supposed to use the herbs that the ancient Romans and Greeks had used, right? So he was accused of witchcraft. He was accused of sorcery. He was accused of everything you can imagine. He had a group of students that followed him around and learned from him. He became essentially the father of modern medicine. He, with a crowbar and a pickaxe, took herbal medicine out of the ancient world, brought it into the modern world, and included things he had learned through chemistry. He's the father of toxicology. He would use poisonous chemicals and minerals and such. Like you think of, chemotherapy to cure diseases. He said the dose makes the poison. So he's actually the father of homeopathy, if we wanted to think about it that way, using diluted doses of something that could be poisonous to treat an illness. He turned the world on its head. After he wrote a few books, most of them are legitimate, excellent medical texts. A few are on alchemy. After he died, many people wrote books using his name. His name would sell books. So there are a ton of counterfeit books out there, supposedly written by Paracelsus, Theophrastus, Bombastus, von Hohenheim. Um, most of them are not. Only a few of those works were actually written by him, and they are absolutely brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant. Much of what came later was written especially several hundred years later when the neo-pagan and occultist movement really got going in early 1900s England. The seances, whenever you turn on an old movie, they're always having seances. Well, yeah, those were really popular in Victorian times. There was a lot of occult type stuff, and a lot of books were written claiming to have been written by Paracelsus, which were actually just, occult books sold by, a huckster to make a buck. There's nothing to them, but it's really confused his legacy. Beyond that, one thing that's really confused his legacy was he was accused. Remember, I said people were accusing of witchcraft and sorcery. They also accused him of Protestantism, which in Germany, and he was in Holland, he was in different places at that time. That was a big no-no. I mean, if the king was Catholic, you had to be Catholic or you were against your king. If the king was Protestant, you had to be Protestant or you were against your king. Went both ways, okay? It was considered an offense against the government to be a different religion than the approved religion of the government. Very much the same today, isn't it? Think about it. If I say my religious convictions say I can't do this that you've demanded by law, yeah, you're in the same situation. Well, he was actually not a Protestant. He actually wrote in one of the documents we can actually attribute to him legitimately. He would not burn with Luther. With a grain of salt. He absolutely thought Martin Luther was going to hell for founding the Lutheran Church, and he would not do it. He is buried in a Catholic cemetery, which proves he was in full communion with the Catholic Church. So, 90% of what you're going to read about Paracelsus is false. Sometimes we may want to believe something that was supposedly written by him, but 90% of it was false. What he actually wrote was absolutely brilliant, and it has its full roots in the monastic medicine, in St. Hildegard and St. Fiacre and Abbot Walafrid Strawbow. It's really, really interesting. And this is where we start seeing German folk medicine. That's not German as in Germany, but Germanic language. The Germanic peoples, their own herbal folk medicine, becoming a formal and recognized tradition of herbal medicine, which continues to this very day. I mean, German folk medicine, it really probably should be the leading school of herbalism in the entire world. But thanks to a couple of world wars and conflicts between Germany and England, and it kind of fell out of fashion for a while. But I mean, everybody now recognizes Ayurveda and recognizes traditional Chinese medicine. German folk medicine, right up there. I mean, honestly, if I had to pick one school of herbal medicine that would suit me and my conditions where I live, given my Anglo-Saxon heritage, Celtic heritage, and all that, yeah, I'd look at some of the Celtic herbs. I'd look at some of the English herbs. But I live in the mountains, and the plants that grow here are the same plants that grow in the Alps. The weather conditions are similar. Um, I'm fair-haired and fair-skinned, and as tend to suffer from many of the complaints that the people of the Germanic regions suffer from. And yes, some of my genetics probably do trace from there. I think I have at least one Polish ancestor. German folk medicine works better for me than traditional Chinese medicine. I know because I studied traditional Chinese medicine for a decade, and my asthma didn't get any better. You know, and one herb, Codenopsis Shen, that really seemed to help. German folk medicine works for me like crazy. When I started taking the Swedish bitters, when I started reading up on, Father Nape, Father Kunzel, Brother Aloysius, Maria Trebin, everything they wrote worked for me. So for me, I would take German folk medicine over traditional Chinese medicine. I will say something probably fairly controversial. Ayurveda doesn't work for me at all. My body type and my personality type does not fit their worldview of, the doshas. It just plain does not work for me. Yoga doesn't work for me. A vegetarian diet does not work for me. And Ayurvedic herbs do not work for me. I've gone to some pretty, good practitioners, and it's been like useless. It's been like, spitting in the wind. Um, the herbs like angelica and masterwort and all these herbs that grow in the mountains around me work well for me. And the tradition that informs me the most of that is German folk medicine, strongly influenced by Paracelsus. Paracelsus may have even formulated the Swedish bitters. To me, absolutely fascinating character, and very pivotal, very pivotal. Yeah, next week we'll get into the herbal traditions of Protestant England, some of the greatest herbalists of all time, and you are going to see so many parallels between Paracelsus, Theophrastus, Bombastus, von Hohenheim, and Nicholas Culpeper. Nicholas Culpeper in Protestant England faced very much the same charges and accusations as Paracelsus did in Catholic Germany or Sweden or Holland or wherever he happened to be at that time. So it actually really comes down a lot to guilds and trade unions and educational professionals trying to keep their monopoly, really, and a lot of laws, a lot of laws. What's the old saying? In a country where there are many laws, there are many outlaws. That's where a lot of that controversy does stem from. But anyway, y'all have an excellent week. Please just remember to keep the innocent people on both sides of any conflict in your prayers. And remember, never give up the rights to be self-sufficient in terms of anything, fill in the blanks, fill in the blanks. It probably was President Reagan who said a government that can do anything for you can do anything to you. So keep that in mind. Y'all do have a good week, and I'll see you next time. And maybe, God willing, we can be a little more lighthearted in the next one. You know me, I'm always laughing. I'll be laughing on my way to the cemetery. Have a good one.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.